Isaiah 83 is the fourth of four servant songs that were launched already in Isaiah 41, verse 8 and 9. So you have to know that what the servant songs are about. You have to know Isaiah 41, 8 and 9, and 43, 10 and 11, 44, 1, 21, 45, 4, 48, 20, 49, 3, in order to know Isaiah 53.
Sure.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say, by the way.
I know. I took it away from you. I'm taking away the limelight from you because I'm hoping to get a few customers and subscribers.
No, this is... Now, the second part of my interview. Most Christians, I have found, don't know anything about Christianity. I know more about Christianity than they do. And that's kind of sad. I mean, like, I'm talking about just the beliefs and the foundations.
The ones that are easiest to get out of Christianity are the ones who are more knowledgeable. And I will share something that I'm sure you know, although we've not had any conversation. You have met Gerim, people who are genuine converts to Jewish faith, and almost all of them that you know are former Christians. And what is intriguing about them is if you go back and ask them, they'll tell you that not only were we Christians, but we were really from really very religious Christians, evangelical Christians. The more they know... I had
Neeson Black on the show.
Oh, he's a sweetie pie.
And he was mamish
right.
hovering.
So I'll tell you, so the Christian religion also has their liberal denominations, okay, that know very little. But as it turns out, the people who convert to Judaism and are coming, 95% are coming from Christianity, are coming from the most frum Christians, who are the most knowledgeable Christians.
Actually, he was a minister.
He was a minister. He was a theologian. He was absolutely. So therefore it's not coming from, let's say Hillary Clinton, okay? So Hillary Clinton is a Christian. She's a Christian, but she's a liberal Christian, very liberal, right? That's not the kind of people that convert to Judaism. It can happen, but the vast majority are dafka coming from the most knowledgeable Christians, the most serious Christians who are taking God seriously. And therefore, when they hear these objections, they go, 1 second, I need to hear more. So by us, it's the opposite. Who are the kids that are lost to the ranks of Jews for Jesus? It's punk fuckhead. It's Jews who know nothing about the faith they've been asked to abandon. It's not B'nai Yeshiva who sat and learned with us. It could happen. Look, there is 1 in a million. You have unfortunate cases in history. You had even the chief rabbi of Rome after the Holocaust who wanted his job back. His name was Zoli, Israel Zoli. And when he came back, because he hid out in the Vatican, and after the war he came back and said, I want my job back. And they beat him up on the street because he didn't save the Jews of Italy, of Rome. The Gestapo took them away. Then he ran back to the Vatican and got baptized. You imagine that? Imagine that you have the Holocaust, so 1/3 of Klal Yisrael is murdered, and then a year later, the chief rabbi of Rome converts to Christianity and taking on the name of Pius XII. It's mind-blowing. You imagine the agony the Klal Yisrael was enduring, that we have that. So, of course, you have these anomalies in history of these very dark people. Even in the Pablo Cristiani wasn't a Rav. He was a Jew in France. Pablo Cristiani was a Jew in Spain who converted to Christianity, but he became a Karaite first, as did Nicholas Dunn and Yamach Shemay V'Zichrei. These are really, really bad people that are, there were some dark figures in history that come from, look, there were people the guy who started the Reconstructionist movement, knew how to learn. Mordechai Kaplan was not an Amaharitz, and whatever it was, that's just, look, in truth, if you look at Tanakh, the truth is that in the ancient world, the pagan religions were much more successful than Christianity. In the time of Elijah the prophet, only 7,000 Jews didn't bow. Only 7,000 Jews were from. The Jews were worshiping Baal like crazy, right? Chizkiyahu was a from Jew. He could have been Mashiach. Chizkiyahu Melech was the greatest Davidic king that ever lived. It says Beferish, no one ever before or after him be a greatest Chizkiyahu. He had a son that was worshiping Avodah Zarah. Now his son does tshuva. Menashe repents. Look at Chizkiyahu's father, Achaz, was a nightmare. He died young at 36. He ruled for 16 years. So it doesn't work that way. As it turns out, Christianity, of all the false religions that attacked our faith, is the least successful with from Jews. because it stipulates it's based on Tanakh, and therefore they get caught. If you don't make that claim, then you can get away with it. But Christianity is very vulnerable. It's the easiest religion to expose and show that it's false because of the claims.
So you see these missionaries and you say, I'm going to dedicate myself to fighting them.
Oh, for sure.
So you start collecting literature?
Not fighting, loving them. I don't mean loving in some weird way, like I love you.
Contesting, disputing them.
Yeah, but you have to be very careful because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings. You have to be very careful with your words. I, first of all, do not attack them. I answer their questions. My show on YouTube, as an example, is all call-in live shows. And what I do is I respond to the questions that they ask. You have to be very careful to play the black piece, using chess as a metaphor, responding to their objections rather than introducing your own. You don't go to a Christian and say, this is why I think you shouldn't be a Christian. Really offensive. Just rather say, please tell me the reason you think I should be a Christian. What's the most persuasive reason? And respond to that. If you don't like somebody, you don't want to learn from them.
Correct.
So you want to make sure you don't become a person they don't like. And no one wants to be just told, yes. You have to know how to talk to a Christian. You have to know what's meaningful. And you know, my Rabbi taught me years ago, Hashem gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Try to maintain that ratio.
Right.
Learn how to listen. So when I'm sitting with a Christian, I let them talk. I say, just tell me what is the, and I'm listening for the anomaly. I don't interrupt him. Every single thing that he says that I disagree with, I don't point out. I wait for that point, that knach. And I'm sure you do the same thing as well with your Talmidim, in that when someone comes to you with a problem.
Yeah, I never interrupt people.
What's that?
I never interrupt people.
So you have to learn. It takes time. You don't want to offend people, because if you offend someone, like you and I would not want to learn linguistics from Noam Chomsky, even though he's a genius in linguistics. Why? Because we don't like him personally. You don't want to become an unlikable person. I'm not faking it. I think I'm a nice guy.
Right.
So, and I also, because I understand Christianity and I understand how they got themselves in that much trouble, so therefore it doesn't bother me, because I understand how they got themselves in this much trouble.
But I want to understand the process. You make the decision that this is what you're going to do. How do you go about it?
Well, you first lecture.
How would someone become, Tovia singer? What would he do?
Oh, today it's easier than ever. In the
but
old days,
I'm saying in your day.
I had it easy in a way because there was no internet. So therefore, in order for me to help a Christian, I had to speak to the Christian. I had to sit down.
No, but you didn't know what they believed in and where it came from, and the doctrines and the responses.
They make it easy. It's not like the Druze, that their religion is some big secret. On the contrary, the missionaries are very happy to share with you all the reasons why they believe what they believe.
And then what do you do with that?
I study it carefully. You do your research. You have to understand what it is they believe. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to know what is it they believe and why do they believe it and why is it compelling. How is their brain processing this information?
Because people tell me they go back and forth and they're not.
Listen, you have to, on the level I'm doing it at, you have to really listen. What is it that you believe and why do you find this compelling? And then what you have to do is unpack it in a way that they can understand. You don't want to attack because people can't handle that. Rather, you want to slowly go, okay, let's just examine the evidence.
What did you do?
Well, I read through the Christian Bible very, very carefully, and I read,
commentaries on the Christian Bible?
Raymond Brown would be very important. A lot of people won't do that, but he's probably the greatest New Testament scholar in the English-speaking world in the latter half of the 20th century. So his work, this is not for everybody, but his work.
No, I'm so curious how this would happen. The death of the Messiah,
very critical.
I watched a lot of TV, and I use that as reference it.
You have to understand.
Throw in a few Rashis. So.
You have to understand the scholarship, but I will tell you this: it's very transparent what's going on. This is not hard. Okay, you don't have to sit and study Aquinas for this. This is really, the Christian Bible is very simple. It's very naked. It's very, what's happening is very transparent. Right. It's October 7th.
And you're taking notes of steers and things?
Yeah, yes, everything and all the above. I write.
You're learning at Bein.
Yes, and I'm writing books on it. It's very naked.
No, but you're still in high school, right? You're in high school. You should go, well, how are you doing this?
No, but
If I go to the average yeshiva guy back then and say, okay, I want you to go battle Christianity.
No,
so he's like,
the
what do I
first
do?
thing is you meet a Christian. The Christian brings up some verse in Isaiah, right? So you go back to the verse in Isaiah and you look it up. You know, when we were in yeshiva and we come Havdol Elf Alfi Havdolos and we're learning Gemara, and the Gemara is quoting a pasuk in Yeshayahu, how many of us actually got up from and pulled out of Yeshayahu? Didn't happen too often. Now it's not a joke. Now when Paul quotes in chapter 9, verse 27 in Romans, is quoting Isaiah 10:22. So it's very important to know Isaiah chapter 10. Now, as it turns out, Isaiah 10 is mamish delicious because it's about the story of Chizkiyahu and the destruction of the 10 northern tribes and the more than 40 cities in Yehuda, and that there'll be a remnant that will be preserved. It's very gorgeous. It's very powerful. It's one of the greatest miracles that occurred since the Exodus was when the Assyrian army was destroyed, was wiped out on Pesach. On a Pesach, Jews went to sleep in Yerushalayim thinking they were finished. They did the Haggadah, they ate from the Korban Pesach and went to sleep, and they woke up in the morning and there was no horses, and they looked over the wall and there was 185,000 dead soldiers. This is nothing like that ever happened since Matan Torah. There's nothing like that. So therefore, that was a traumatic event. But it was, why didn't Chizkiyahu sing Shira? People, he didn't say Shira. The Gemara says that's why he was the Mashiach. But why didn't he? He was the greatest king that ever lived. He was, 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 4, says there was no one before him or after him that was the greatest Chizkiyahu. So why didn't he say Shira? So people give 500 reasons for it. And I don't know why people don't get this. It's so transparent that there was the biggest calamity at that time too. And the calamity was that the whole Klal was ripped out. Everything, more than 40 cities in Yehuda were destroyed. Everything but Yerushalayim was destroyed. And the whole north was destroyed. So there was a tremendous trauma. I'll tell you something personal. Thought I had, April 13th, the Iranians, Yimach Shemam V'Zichram, sent over 200 drones and missiles and rocket ballistic missiles. And I watched it with my eyes. I didn't go into the room. I watched it. I don't know why, but I watched it and I could see these things because I knew what was happening, right? Now, I ask you a question. We celebrated and went, wow, that was amazing. Of course. But did we really, this is a very intimate moment right now. I want you to listen. Did we really thank Hashem to the degree that would be logical, just logical? There's nothing esoteric about it. The answer is really not. I mean, we went, wow, there's not much miracle. And then we went on with our day. Why didn't we sing Shira to the level 185, whatever it was, missiles and drones and ballistic missiles would have wiped us out? And we should have been, say Hallel. Why didn't we? Because we were so damaged from October 7th and with the war is still going on with Hashem Yerachim, right? And there are Nebuch hostages now who are sitting b'shivya in Gaza right now. And therefore we can't be Shir because we're in so much pain. We're totally traumatized. So people have to understand that's what's going on in times of Chizkiyahu. And in Hanami, there was a great miracle. Hundreds of missiles aimed at little Eretz Yisrael. And the Jews, of course, we were thankful, but there was no Shira. Why no Shira? October 7th. And we're still in the middle of the war. And every day, Nebuch, who you and I wake up in the morning, we go online to the news and we see Nebuch's face, and we just hope we don't recognize the name of the person. It says, it's very sad. So we are all traumatized. You and I will never be the people we were on October 6th last year. And therefore, it's hard to say Shira when there's so much pain going on. So
you prepared pasuk by pasuk. You'd go to them, they'd say something to you, you'd look it up, you get a response, then you'd come back, and then they'd give you another one. I feel like there was more to it than that.
No. Initially it is, but then you have to study it, look it up. You need to know. You got to know everything. Look, this is all I do. It's not like
I've heard you on these programs, and you're just rattling off so much. And like I say, even in the course of this conversation, how many from Jews have heard of Aquinas? You know what I mean? How many from Jews, could list the various, priests and ministers and historical figures? I mean, there was a lot more that went into this than just, you said Pshat in Isaiah 6. But I've got a kasha because I looked up the Mefarshim over here and it doesn't say that. Okay, well, what about Isaiah 22? I'll be right back. I go back, I look it up, I go back. Good, but I can give you this there.
What happens if you drink Isaiah? What happens if when I walk the streets of Yerushalayim, Yeshayahu is rolling in my mind, and Yeshayahu, HaKodesh VaTorah, 95% what he wrote was poetry.
Right.
Understand?
So you can interpret it any way you want.
No, it's not that. It's not. It's just.
I'm just saying when they go and they take something.
Right. It's very vulnerable. Right. But I'm dizzy with it because he's using a word. Why did he say it like that? Why is he using this Lashon? And no one used the Lashon Kodesh the way he did. There was no parallel to Isaiah in terms of the Lashon Kodesh. It's unbelievable. Why did he use
you find this is the only place
so
this word
appears. Fantastic. It's so, I give you examples. I mean, it says at the end of Isaiah. Isaiah is very angry at people who are keeping mitzvahs, but they're really not connected. So Isaiah says, all your mitzvahs so it really says they're like menstrual rags. That's what it says. Now, usually translated as filthy rags, but it really says it's menstrual rags. Why is he use such a mundane, weird language? Why? And it's like not a nice thing to talk about. But what he's saying is something fantastic. What's menstruation? It means that a woman drops an egg and the egg was never fertilized, right? So Isaiah is saying, you don't get it? We could have had a baby together. If only you would have not only kept Shabbos, but you would have cared for the widow, for the orphan, for the weakest member of society, we would have had a baby. And never we have something else. We have a period. And that's what, so Isaiah is using language so powerful. How did it knock you over? How could you not be shocked by that? So therefore, when I hear anyone say something about Yeshaya, and it's a very pasuk, it's so good, you eradicated what it actually says. It shocks you. But you have to be completely into Novi, and you have to eat it and drink it. It's really quite very gorgeous, very delicious.
So that's what you said, I'm going to go and dedicate myself to Navi.
You have to. And the person who did it is the Abarbanel. And I say this to every viewer. If you're going to try without the Abarbanel, you're going to fail. Really? You will, that's right.
More than the Malbim, more than...
No, Malbim came later, and he's copying... Not that he's copying Chas v'Chalila. He will start something that no one else did. So there's no one like the Abarbanel, born in 1437 in Portugal. He dies in Italy because he goes in the garage. The point is...
most people would not know that. I just thought I'd throw that out as an example.
He wrote his
more than just reading Tanakh.
He wrote his whole parish in 1481 on the Nevi'im, multi-volume, in 6 weeks. There was no mind like the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel is the only, if you want to think of...
I didn't know he wrote it in 6 weeks.
We know. He writes it down. Exactly. What happened was, he was born in Portugal in 1437. He was going home. He was the head of finance. He was the head of treasury in Portugal.
Right.
He is told, the Christians admired him. They looked up to him like crazy. He's on his way home in a carriage going home at night, and the Christians come over to him. They loved him. They speak about him in the highest way. No one else like him. And they said, Rabbi, you have to leave. Vayokem Melech Chodesh is a new king, and he's looking to kill you. Okay? He turns the carriage around, and he crosses over into Spain. And from the time he enters into Spain until Ferdinand and Isabella, Yamach Shemam V'Zichram, discover who's in their midst, he had a little interim period of time. It was really coming up to the winter, and it was during that time where he finally had a moment to sit down, and that's where he writes his parish on the Nevi'im. They then hire him to be the finance, to do the same thing in Spain, which he does for 11 years, from 1481 to 1492. They tell him in 1492, he was a multi-billionaire. I'm willing to pay you off that, don't do this garish. He had saved many Jewish communities. He's a multi-billionaire. Genius of, there's no parallel to it. You'd have to go to the Rambam to have that kind of mind. Because he was a maverick of every... No one ever did. So he then is hired in 1492. He's running now for Spain, their finances. And he's offered at the end of the game, he offers them billions. They won't accept it because of a Jew who converted to Christianity, stops them, named Torquemada. And then they say to him...
He was a Jew, Torquemada?
Torquemada was a Jew. Halachically a Jew. Mishumad. Yeah. And Torquemada... convinced when he heard that the Abarbanel was offering, they needed the money because Columbus was setting sail on August 12th of 1492.
He was Jewish too.
Now we know he's Jewish, and we always suspected. Now we know he's Jewish. But the point was, he's going. So, and this Jew who converted to Christianity goes in. He throws a cross on the ground. He says, "You're going to sell out Christ for 30 pieces of silver, the way Judas Iscariot did." And he walks out, and he's mevatel anything. But B'damaya chayi, by your blood you live. And therefore we had great people. Rabbi Yosef Cairo is born in Spain, but as a little child he comes here to Eretz Yisrael. You have other giants coming to Eretz Yisrael who happen to meet in Sfat. And the Shulchan Aruch is written because you have an intersection of all people that, because of
So
that
Barbanel left then.
The Barbanel said, they offered him, they say, stay in Spain. Stay in Spain. Keep a minion with you. You don't have to convert anything. Keep everything you have and keep a minion and stay. And he says, if my people go, I'm going with them. And he goes to Italy. And in Italy, that's where he spends his life. And everything else you read that was written by the Barbanel was written in Italy, and it was nifter in 1508. He was,
They didn't make him finance minister?
No. Once he was a very, very wealthy man, and then he devoted his life to writing.
He was allowed to take his money with him?
And they allowed him to it. It's very interesting. So the Christian scholars, the high-level scholars, do quote Rashi and Radak, but they quote them in a way that's not pleasant, whatever, they'll quote it. But the Abarbanel they'll call the philosopher or the great doctor. They speak of the Abarbanel as something totally different. To them, he was the Abarbanel. My friend, I just say this. Abarbanel did something that no one ever did before, and that is he comes to any parsha, any sugya, and he says, we have problems, and we have a whole series of problems, and let me present some questions. And you go, wow, I never thought of that, and I never thought of that. And he presents 5 or 10 questions, and he says, let me give you the solution. And what he does, he solves it with one equation, and it solves every issue. And he says, oh, now I got it. No one had ever done that. That's why if you want to go through Tanakh, particularly Isaiah, Cheskel, Yirmiyahu, with Rashi and Radak, you're not going to have there's no one today on this planet who's an expert in Nevi'im that does not rely on the Barbanel. Period. End. Now, there are subsequent giants who use the same type of teaching, but prior to that, if you go to the Radak, you go to Rashi takes 2 words and says, okay, it means this and this, but why am I told this story? What does this story have to do with anything? What is going on here? Right. Why did he do it? How did it come to do this? So the Barbanel is a storyteller, meaning he says, you need to look at the big picture. There's nothing like it. Just like when the Rambam, Olav Shalom, when he wrote...
The Rabbi does that, though.
Yes, the Ramban incidentally wrote his Parish, right. He's wordy, but doesn't use this style. But right, he's more wordy and lays it out.
But he'll start off with, this is what we learned from
absolutely.
this.
He didn't get out of nowhere, but the Nevi'im, this is unprecedented to do this on this level. His also very important to read his introductions. His introductions, it's like, why do we need Divrei Yamim? We, after all, have Shmuel and we have Shmuel Melechim. Why do I need Divrei Yamim? That his introduction to Sefer Shmuel is very critical. The key is he's unique, and we're all soymech on the. If you listen to anybody on Barbanel, on Navi, it's always a Barbanel. Without a Barbanel, you're not going to understand it. We'll all rely on him completely, and he's a giant that just like no one wrote all of Halacha like the Rambam did, and he was a young guy. He was in nothing. How old was he? He was in his 20s. He wrote the Yad HaChazal, he wrote Mishneh Torah. And here's the smartest person that ever lived, possibly, right? The smartest guy since Shlomo Melech who ever lived, and he is able to write in not just Hebrew, but the easiest, simplest Hebrew that anyone is going to see, because that was the point of the Mishneh Torah. So it was something that, how is that even humanly possible? I mean, you and I have visited university where I've lectured, and I've seen blot Gemara without Rashi and Taisus because they're older than Rashi and Taisus. I've seen that at Cambridge University, Pennsylvania. They showed and that means Rashi was looking at a klaf of Chulin, and that's all you had was Gemara. So it seems to be a superhuman feat to have done what he did.
Rav Noach Weinberg uses Mishneh Torah as a proof of God.
Right.
He says no human could have written this.
And he's writing halacha on Mashiach, and he's writing halacha on bring karbanos. He's not writing only halacha on Chaim, on tefillin and what time and how much, what is called the thing and what bracha you make. He's writing on the halachas of bring karbanos. It's like it's not possible for no. So the Barbanel is in that world. It's interesting. He wrote in his Tzava,
Last Will and Testament.
Last Will and Testament, that every Jew should learn Chumishah Torah, and they should learn the Guide to the Perplexed. Every Jew should do that. Should learn Tanakh and should read the Guide to the Perplexed. So he, of course, the Rambam for him was giant. He argued on the Rambam because he was a Rishon. The Abarbanel was the end of the Rishonim.
He had a din of a Rishon? I always thought he was an
So the Abarbanel was the end. That means after the Abarbanel was Nifter, he died on Shabbos. His Tzion is in Venice. He was visiting his son in Venice, and he was Nifter. I think it was on Shabbos, and that's where it's seen to this day. And he was just completely right. So he's the end. 1508, he's Nifter, and that's the end of the Rishonim. And then we do have a luminary who emerges, and that's the Vilna Gaon, who simply is just...
But that's 200 years later.
200 years later, but he's arguing on Rishonim, which was unheard of. That means, and people recognize that he was just, did not belong to our door. But the Abarbanel was it. So you have basically the bookshelves, like the beginning of the Rishonim is basically Rashi, and the end of the Rishonim is the Abarbanel. And the Abarbanel basically, in terms of his intellectual understanding and his ability to communicate and organize information, like what did Rashi do during the Crusades with a chicken feather? So it's basically, you come to the end of a Tekufa, a personality emerges that basically is a throwback to the very beginning. So yeah, there's nothing like the Abarbanel.
Okay, so you learn Tanakh, you'll read the New Testament. Now, what do? You go out there.
No, but I'm talking, people are contacting me. My son is involved in Christianity. I mean, before we started, someone was talking to me about their own child was involved in Christianity.
Your son was involved in Christianity?
I know somebody who's involved in Christianity. Families are always contacting me, or Christians are contacting me. Yeah, of course. Now, there's a difference. Today, there are millions of people who watch me on YouTube, millions of people, okay? And as a result of that...
I have like 20,000.
Right. So you have thousands of people, but you have people, your things
but I'm
are
hoping
copied
now
over.
We'll hit your whole audience.
Now you're going to be a big hit. So the point is that now it's different. It means you and I do not have to do public speaking as much as we used to, because we can put out a program like this.
It's unbelievable.
And people can watch it all over the world.
Unbelievable. I've never spoken to an audience of 20,000 people.
Right.
I spoke to a few thousand, etc., but never in person 20,000.
Well, when you're speaking to 1,000 people at a banquet, you know that you have to basically entertain, and you have to basically keep things very concise. You can't go into depth because you're holding a crowd. Right? But I
never do anyway, so it makes it easier for me.
When you're on air, we can, like we're doing now, we can really take it apart.
Right. Well, that's what they say. Like, you have to take someone like Joe Rogan, who keeps you there for 3 hours. You know what I mean? And just keeps asking and asking and asking. Right. You can go into a much greater depth.
He would make a wonderful Joe.
Yeah, would I?
He would, because he asks questions.
Yeah.
He's willing. He has a lot of chutzpah. Yeah. And you need to be able to ask those very critical questions.
Right. If you know him, tell him I'm available.
I always talk to him about you.
I'm ready to go to Texas.
He's plotting. He can't get over you.
You ever been on Joe Rogan?
No.
You been on any of these big podcasts and
I'm
things?
on podcast. I'm interviewed. I mean, I'm on another interview. Oh my. Yeah, I'm on another interview a little in a little while tonight.
I'm surprised Ben Shapiro never had you on.
I don't fit into his world. His world is very different. That is, I
guess having someone come in and knock Christianity would
politics.
be bad for his... But he does religion. He's had on priests and ministers and interviewed them and talked about religion.
I don't know this, but I never had this conversation with him. A very significant number of his viewers are conservative evangelicals. So he understands that it's his partner, who both co-owns Daily Wire, is an evangelical Christian.
Jeremy Boring.
Right. And he has Nebuch. He has one guy who's on, very nice fellow, conservative, grew up totally irreligious, who converted to Christianity. So he has one guy. He has another guy who's Catholic on, who's married to a Jewish girl.
Really?
Yeah. So, but she converted to Catholicism. So, you have, the whole world that he's enveloped in are evangelical Christians, and he's doing what he does, but it's different what I do. I'm here to help
so
Jews
you were
out of the church.
confronting missionaries. Where did it go from there? Then where's your journey? You're out there speaking to missionaries. You're responding to them.
But I'm writing books on the side. Wrote a number of books on the topic, and then then people would say, "Rabbi, explain to me Isaiah 53." So I explained to them. I said, "This is crazy. Isaiah 53 is 12 passages, right? It's a whole thing. And what's happening there? Who's speaking? Who's talking about? If you don't know, it's poetry. It's the fourth of four sermons."
I heard this guy in California, Jews for Jesus guy, and he says the Jews have come out with an Isaiah where they left out chapter to 53.
Well, these are lies,
You just made it up, right?
It's Adarabba. It's just punk fakert. It's the Christians that left out everything but Isaiah 7, 9, and 53. That means all these Christians, you go to a Christian and say, tell me what it says in Isaiah 52. Tell me what it says in Isaiah 54. They have no clue. They have to look at it. So let me ask you a question. I have a shot of you. Isaiah 53, you knew Baal Peh, you knew Bahar. 54, you don't have no clue. You have to look it up. We both know it's a haftarah twice a year on that woman who is barren and who's hated and so on. Hashem promises her that no weapon, Klal Yisrael, that no weapon formed against you will succeed. This is like the waters that know it to me. That's why I read it twice a year. So it's really gorgeous. So no, it's just the opposite. They're projecting themselves onto us. We are learning all of Isaiah. They only learn certain passages ripped out of context, and therefore, of course, it can look Christological, as a point you made earlier. When literature is poetic, it's very vulnerable and very susceptible. Conversely, an example I gave on air yesterday in a different interview, I said, if a text is not poetic, you don't have to read it in context. As an example, if I'm walking in the forest of Indonesia and I see a behemoth, and I don't know if it's a kosher behemoth or not. So all I have to open up is the 11th chapter of the book of Leviticus, which it tells me how to recognize an animal that's tahor, that's clean, right? So
I see. All the animals that I eat chew their cud and they have split feet.
Stay with me. The show has to be a hit.
You know I have ADD. You know that.
But the point is that Leviticus 11, Vayikra Perek Aleph, could be read out of context, and you'd be able to identify if a marine animal is a coat which doesn't require shechita. So you're fishing, you catch a fish. I want to know, is this fish, I can eat it or not eat it? Right. You open up the
fins and scales.
Yeah, right, exactly. It has fins and scales. So if it has fins and scales, so it's kosher. We know from the oral Torah that if it has scales, it also has fins. Fine. So I know I could kill it any way I want to and broil it and cook it. For how to kill an animal, so then you need to live Deuteronomy 12:21, where it says you have to kill an animal manner I've shown you, and then you have to go to a halach l'moish misina of shechit and so on, and getting rid of the blood. Fine. So my point is that Leviticus 11 you can read out of context because it's only the halachas of what's a kosher animal. Isaiah 3 is the fourth of four servant songs that were launched already in Isaiah 41 verse 8 and 9. So you have to know that what the servant songs are about. You have to know Isaiah 41 8 and 9 and 43 10 and 11, 44 1, 21, 45 4, 48 20, 49 3 in order to know Isaiah 53.
Sure.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say, by the way.
I know. I did get away from you. I'm taking away the limelight from you because I'm hoping to get a few customers and subscribers.
No, this is. I'm trying to get to. Okay, so now you're writing books. You're doing this. Where do you go from there?
Oh, then a doctor in Dallas says to me, Rabbi, come to Dallas. I'll fly you out every week and give a lecture at the Jewish Community Center of Dallas. Now, Dallas is interesting. Right, responding to all the things. I mean, it's can do.
Because a lot of evangelicals in Texas.
Yeah, it's like Borough Park for evangelicals. so I said, how many weeks we do? I said, I'm not sure exactly, but let's do every week. So I think it was maybe every Tuesday night. I would fly in. At that time, it was I don't want to say which airline, but it rhymes with Continental. So whatever it was, I flew into there and I did a thing, and the place was packed. You couldn't stand.
You didn't.
No, 3/4 were goyim from all over Texas came. The first it was Jews and a lot of Christians, but then
because they wanted to argue with you, or because they wanted to hear
many of them wanted to argue with me, and there are many Jews and Rabbonim in Eretz Yisrael today that were there that came to show me why I'm wrong at those lectures I gave in the 90s, Jewish. And they converted to. I don't know how many. I'm not going to say the B'nai Noach movement started at that series of programs. But it did. I mean, no, I'm not saying it did, but it really was and it was really an amazing thing because what I did was my thought
this guy knew you from the
I'm
books.
going to record it. He knew me from the books, but I thought I need to record it all. Right. So I could record it on cassette tapes at the time. And now when someone came over and says, "I want to know Isaiah 3," I said, "Here's a cassette tape that costs 10 cents, to get a blanket, make it, and they'll go read it." And they would do it, and they would do tshuva. So that's what it was. And then everyone
you never figured out the business model. aspect of this business.
I wasn't trying to, but there was nothing like it. No one had ever done that before.
Right.
So I organized the information in a way that people can understand, going from who's speaking about. You got to explain.
So how do you work out a lesson plan when you don't know how many weeks this is going to go on?
It's from the experience. That's why I'm lucky, because there was. I said at the early part of our interview that I'm really lucky. Why? Because when I saw there's no internet, why does that help me? Because I had to actually sit with a Christian.
Right.
I actually talked to him, and I had to listen to the Christian. You understand?
Right.
And therefore, I understood how their minds worked because I actually had to hear what it is they believe in. You follow?
How many weeks did this go on?
And therefore, I was in battle. I was battle. It's years.
It went for years that year.
Whatever it is, you're always developing you're developing new ideas and insight. With all your self-deprecation, you're always developing your mind and new insights every day. So I'm always, now, of course.
That's because my memory
I'm
went
going to say
just
to you,
remembering it again.
I know that 90% of the questions you are asked, number one, you've been asked already once.
Yes.
And number
I
two
almost
is,
never get asked
and number
question.
two is you have 5 different answers to any of them. And when you're asked the question, you have to size up, you have to shots up your audience, who you're speaking to, of which answer you're going to give for this question based on the person you're listening to. So you don't have one answer. You can hit it from any direction.
It took me years to learn how to do it. Because I would always say things that would offend people. And now I only do it sometimes.
Okay.
But I had to figure out how to present this in a way, because I would give answers that were technically correct, but used to not make people.
But what do you also do? I'm just going to. What you also do is after you answer a question, let's say 20 years ago, you answered a question, but then you go home and say, I could have added from this angle, right? And then you go perfect it. You say, you know what? I could have added something more. I didn't say something I could have said. I said something, it really maybe is distracting. So you're always refining and refining until you have it. And you have not just one answer, but you have 10 answers or 20 answers. And you have to decide based on who my audience is, what's the predicament we're in, of which answer. They're all true, but which way are we going to attack this? So that's where you are. So when years and years of developing, and you're always learning, the learning curve never stops. You're always developing new ways. And we are both, I am sure, always thinking of Psukim and Tanakh, ideas in Yahadus that bothered us when we were younger. And now we're going, now I understand what Rashi meant. Right. When I was a kid in yeshiva and I'd read Rashi, and the Rabbi goes, Zok Helik Rashi, I said, what's so Helik? He's saying 4 words. I don't even know what he's talking about. It seemed like, what are you talking? And then we come back to the Rashi 25 years later, go, wow, man. So that's what happens. You're always developing, and Torah is no end. See, one thing, I want to say one thing too.
Yes.
Okay. The one thing about the New Testament is it's very easy. The Gospels are very easy to read, but there's no second level. There's no depth.
I don't like sequels. Where a guy gets married and has a baby. It's like, I like the originals.
You're impossible. So, but the point is, the Christian Bible does not have any lower levels. It's just, that's it. Bang, smack.
Right.
Instead, Tanakh lahavdil, there's no end to it. There's end, depth, lower, deep, hotter, more and more delicious. So
now I'm going to keep coming back to this. Now you're giving this class once a week in Dallas.
Right.
Where does it go from there?
It all's growing. I mean, I'm doing public speaking again. There's no YouTube yet. YouTube doesn't begin until 2000.
To Jews or to non-Jews?
All over the world.
Now, how did that happen?
People say, I want to hear you speak. No, people hear my video, then they speak, and it's word of mouth.
There were no videos back then.
So people watched, they had VHSs and they had my videos. The people watch, they film it, they put it up. I don't know. Word gets out. I mean,
when did you become like Tovia singer that everyone knew who this is the guy to go to?
No, it's not like I have a lot of competition. There are very few people in the world that do what I do at this level.
Yeah.
So it was, just people wanted to learn it. It happened to be intriguing. It also is intriguing because there's really there's something dark going on here. Right. This is there's good and evil here.
But no one heard this clarion call except for you.
There's nobody else who heard this and said,
well, I should really
do this. That's a kasha for the rest of the world. I don't understand why more people aren't doing this.
If you're the only one doing something, it's really a kasha on you. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm looking for the transformation. Right now, you are world famous. You have thousands of videos. Everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows what you do. Where did that go from learning in the mirror to this? It wasn't from giving a class once a week in Dallas.
No. It's listening to them, trying to understand. There was something.
I want to know where did it go?
So there was always something perplexing to me. So I'm always learning. I'm studying this very deep, and I'm trying to figure out why would you believe in this?
Right.
See, as a religious kid, from kid, I'm going, why would you believe something so weird?
Right.
There's nothing like this in Tanakh. Nothing.
Right.
So, but these are intelligent people.
But just describe the trajectory to me. Where did you go? How did this happen?
It's on my own. I had no one to go to. There was no one.
Right.
So that was good because it meant that I didn't have to work with preconceived notions. I had to forge it on my own.
How many years did this take till they were flying you all around the world to speak about this?
I don't know. It didn't take long because right away I had a lecture here. Then I heard, he was a big hit. I'm going to have him there. And then it goes on from there. But
all right. But you're not flying around.
I did not.
You were still living in America.
There was no one to learn from, really.
Right.
Now, there were other guys. I wasn't the only person. There were other people who were attacking this issue. But we had nothing. We had a book written by a Karaite 200 years ago who argued against Christianity, but he was really arguing against Roman Catholicism, was not really relevant. So you really had to work it out on your own.
Aryeh Kaplan's book.
Yeah, but his book was written for NCS wires, so it's very rudimentary.
I can follow it.
I understand, but it's very rudimentary, and it's fine. Aryeh Kaplan, Zechrein Levracha, wrote that sefer as a prophylactic, as a barrier to prevent NCS wires from becoming Christians, because Jews for Jews are happening at the same time. But it's not written on the scholarly level that we're going to deal with. It's great. It's great for young men and women to learn, to go through. Fine. But not if you're going to get someone out of Christianity. It just doesn't. That's for someone to prevent them from getting involved. At this level, and as I told you, the people who are coming to me and to you who are not Jewish, who want to be Megayer, these are the most sophisticated Christians out there.
Right.
These are, as I said, these are not the liberal Christians.
Right.
This is not, Rudy Giuliani is a Christian, but he's kind of I don't really know, but he's probably a liberal Catholic, whatever. He's a nice man, and these are fundamentalists. These are serious guys. These are Huckabee guys.
At some point, you leave America.
Leave who?
America.
Yeah, I come to Israel. I actually go to Israel first.
Now, I heard that you were in Indonesia.
Yeah, for 5 years.
What is that?
What is that? It's the fourth largest country in the world.
That's the piece that I cannot wrap my head around. I understand you go from New York to Israel, but who stops over at Indonesia on the way? It's not even on the way. You have to go all the way past down over there.
It's the weirdest.
Jakarta?
It's a country of 17,000 islands. So Jakarta is the capital.
I know, it's the only thing I know.
What happens very simply is a story that's impossible to imagine. So the guy who's the head of the Christian, getting a license to build a church, his son had a fear of going outdoors. His son watches me on YouTube. This guy is the head of all Christian churches, Protestant Christian churches in Indonesia. His son has a fear of the outdoors. So his son is watching me on YouTube, and he becomes a Ben Noach, and then tells his father, you got to watch this guy on YouTube. And his father watches it, and he becomes a Ben Noach. And he says, we have all these Jews here in Indonesia who became Christians. Rabbi, he contacts an organization in Indonesia which helps the Jewish community. Not that many Jews in Indonesia. I'm making up the number 10,000. I don't know that.
Okay.
But it's a country that's almost size of the United States.
Doesn't watch my podcast. So.
There you go. So whatever it is, okay. So he offers Christians and Jews who became Christians, if you want to come to the island of Papua, Jeremiah, which is the capital of Papua, which is geographically the largest island, it's like the size of Alaska, and study with Rabbi Singer for a few days, I'll pay for your flight, I'll pay for your hotel. And he said to me, would you do it? The organization said, would you do it? I said, I just won the lottery. I'm going to go to a place where hasn't had a Rav since World War II. And I have hundreds and hundreds of Jews who became Christians for reasons that are beyond the scope of this conversation. And I can help them. And at the end of a few days, they took a vote, and they voted that they don't believe in Jesus. And then they asked me, could you stay on as rabbi? And I knew there were many, many Jews in Indonesia.
Is there any from infrastructure?
Very little, no. There was nothing.
A million? Kosher food?
We had a menu of kosher food you can get, except meat you can't, but you can fly it in from Singapore. Singapore is only an hour and 20-minute flight from Jakarta. You have
Want to go out for dinner?
Bangkok is 2.5 hours away. You have Manila, which is 2.5 hours away. You know, but you go to the supermarkets and they all this, you know, you can find all stuff at the OU. It's not complicated. You just had to bring, you know, every time I'd go to Singapore where I would lecture, so I would fill up a suitcase with frozen meat and chicken they had prepared for me of, you know, 50 pounds of it into a suitcase, and it's an hour flight, and I'd take it off, and I would just hope when I'm entering Indonesia, they don't ask me what's in your suitcase. And sometimes they did, and I had to explain to them that I'm on a special diet, and that's why I have 30 chickens in my suitcase. And believe it or not, I said, what is this special diet you're on? So I would say to them, it's like halal.
It's in Leviticus.
It's like halal, but for Jews. It's called shechita. And I had guys who go on Wikipedia and go, oh, halal for Jews. That's what I would say, because it's a Muslim country. Right? It's the largest Muslim country in the world. So I say it's halal for Jews, and they mamish respected it. It's the only country I ever lived in where I never experienced anti-Semitism. Wow. And on the contrary, they really respected me. They treated me really like royalty. And when I said to them, this is halal for Jews, they respected it. It was not a problem.
How long were you there?
5 years to the day. I
5 years in Indonesia?
To the day that it was coincidence, but it happens to be that I left on May 21st, 5.5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever that is.
So why'd you leave?
Oh, so what happened was I debated a Christian here in Israel at the end of 2018. I debated a Christian at King Solomon Hotel.
So you were there like recently. It wasn't that long ago.
Right. That's I made Aliyah in 2019. The point was, when I did a debate in the King Solomon Hotel, the debate is on YouTube.
Right.
There were maybe 1,000 people in the audience. And after the debate, many people came over to me with their friends in tow saying, my friend's a Christian, help him out. And I realized I knew there was a big problem here in Israel. It's not like I just didn't know it was stage 4. And for those who don't know, there is no stage 5. So I realized that, whoa, I don't think I'm getting any more Jews in the church, out of the church in Indonesia. Anyone who was going to get out is out, as far as I could see. And here in Israel, it's a nightmare. It's a completely unique nightmare. So it was very, very clear to me at that stage. So that debate was in November 2018. And when I went back, I realized that I had to be here in Israel. And it happens to be that I had to sign a new lease if I was going to stay another year. And I told the owner of the place that we had, I said, this is going to be the last year. And that was it. And then
Did anyone take your place?
What? No.
So when you told them you were leaving?
No, there are B'nai Noach groups there. There's from Jews there. There are many that made Aliyah.
But no one took your position.
There's no position.
Well, even to be a Rav there.
It's not. I don't know exactly. There is in Bali, to some degree, there is something going on. You know, the Muslims like me because they theologically hate Christianity. The serious Muslims can't stand Christianity theologically
more than Judaism.
I don't know. They admire Judaism. When Muslims say we respect you, what you believe, they're not lying to you. They're not trying to. They really
when they're not trying to kill you.
No. But we need to segregate that. Islam has a deep respect for Judaism. They really respect our religion.
The Quran says a lot of bad things about it.
It's true. It's all true. But it depends which surahs they are. It's too complicated to go into. But there's certain surahs that are written in the early part of Muhammad's life. And those are the Meccan surahs that are not that, which are not, there are some surahs that are written towards the end of his life when he's in Medina, and there the Jews really are pushing him. So there, the point is,
you got annoyed with us.
The Quran is not nearly remotely as anti-Semitic as the New Testament is. Everyone's got to get it through their head, okay? There are hadith in particular, that means sort of their oral tradition, that have terribly anti-Semitic statements. That's true. It really is there. Like if you see a Jew, the stone will scream out, there's a Jew hiding behind you, come kill him. It's there. But you can't compare it to the anti-Semitism of the New Testament. You can't compare Yishmael and Esav. It's not the same. Yishmael does tshuva at the end, as you know.
You have any dealing with Muslims in Israel?
Yes, but it's all positive. That means they like me. They because they use my apologetics to defend Islam. It's the same apologetics. They know that Judaism worships one true God, and we reject vicarious atonement. We hate the Trinity. And remember, Islam did go to war with the Christian world for 700 years. The longest war ever fought in human history was one that began in 709, 710, and ended in 1492. And the Muslims ultimately lost that war.
Right.
But so the Muslims have an aversion to Christianity, and they respect the Tawhid, the belief of the Jew of the absolute unity of God, and also that we appeal to God's mercy to forgive our sins, not for some guy dying for our sins. That's stupid, nonsense, disgusting. So therefore, that we are complete, absolute monotheists, that there's no God but the true God. As it says in Nehemiah chapter 9, verse 6. There is no one else besides Hashem. Ephes Kameni, Isaiah 46, verse 9. There's nothing else. There's one and there's nothing else. This is very critical because why is one God so important? Why? So I get, is it a number issue? If there's one God, it tells us about his character. Because if there's one God alone, then why did he need this world? Therefore, he must have created this world out of an act of love. He didn't need this world. Now that the world's, people ask me, Kasha, but God takes pleasure and he's happy because once he created us in his image, so now we have a partnership with God and he really is invested in us. But before the world was created, it was him alone. There was nothing. So therefore, his oneness tells us about his character, that he's complete love, and the whole world was created out of complete act of kindness. And therefore, that kind of a God I want to have a kesher with, and it's a mitzvah d'oraisa to actually have dvekus with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I mean, not just to worship him and to be revolted by idolatry, but to actually have dvekus with Hashem is one of the 613 commandments.
I'll tell you the one thing we didn't do.
What's that?
Because when I told people that you were going to be on the show, they said, well, he's going to tell us what to respond when a missionary speaks to us. That's the only thing we didn't do on this show.
So
we talked about a lot of concepts.
The only thing is listen to the question.
So the question should be, though, if a person wants to arm themselves, if they're faced with a missionary, which of your videos should they listen to?
It's a mistake. You have to know your stuff. And it's a Gemara in Sanhedrin.
Right, but you cannot, these cards. If the missionary says this, say that. You ever see those cards?
Everyone has to stop. You have to know what you're doing. It's just like if you didn't go fight in a war, you hand the guy an M16, you get killed in a second. You don't know. You're not allowed to do that. You can't. You have to know how to answer an apicurs. You have to understand it. And if not, do not talk to missionaries. You don't know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, and you're a frum Jew, you can say, I spoke to a rabbi, because every Orthodox Jew is a rabbi suddenly, and the rabbi couldn't have it. Do not engage unless you know. If you study the material, I've made it easy for people to access, and you know your stuff, so then you could talk. Do not engage people. Don't do anything. I mean, I wouldn't go on atheist channels, which I do, and I'm challenged by atheists on television, on my YouTube channel, but you have to know what the arguments are. You can't go into it and figure it out with someone. You have to know.
When you're confronted, you got to be able to say something.
I can just say to you, we have a problem. We started off this interview by saying there is a problem that we have raised a generation that's largely unfamiliar with what's called the latter prophets, which is a misnomer. We to call them Nevi'im Achronim is only 500 years old.
The ones without the stories.
It's incorrect. But in any case, we came to use that term. But it's if you don't know Tanakh and you're going to answer a missionary, you're going to be in a lot of trouble very, very quickly. Because they're going to pull a pasuk and you have no idea. And some of these pasukim are easy. You know, Zechariah 12 is the only chapter in the book of Zechariah. It's very easy to understand. Zechariah is the only book to which Rashi wrote a Hakdama, an introduction to. Of everything he wrote, he only wrote a Hakdama, an introduction to the book of Zechariah. And he says, I don't have a Masorah, a tradition for Zechariah. And therefore, I'm going to explain to you based on the best of my understanding. This is how humble he was. And he said, you should know that it's a a book that's filled with stumos. It's filled with hidden things, because Zechariah opens with 8 visions. It's not very hard to understand, but you have to understand what's going on. What is Yeshua being brought in front by Satan in front of God? You know this. Well, what's going on here with all the menorahs and all this thing? There's visions that are complicated. It's not an easy book, but there's one chapter, and that's the Mashiach ben Yosef chapter. That's the end of the day. Zechariah 12. The 12th chapter is very easy to understand from beginning to end. Bing bang, and that's all Mashiach, and the order it's going to happen, Yerushalayim, all that's there, Mashiach ben Yosef, all of that. The tremendous, I shouldn't use that term, the trauma, the last moment of trauma that the Jews have to return to the land of Israel before the Messiah comes. Contrary to what you hear in Meir Sharm, there has to be a Jewish state before the Messiah comes. The nation, the Yerushalayim, must be liberated before Mashiach comes. Then nations come to war against the Jews over Yerushalayim. Will be on that day. I will destroy all the nations that come against Yerushalayim. And then we have the trauma. Where people are going to get killed at the very, very end. It's going to be a horrible event. And people are going to mourn. It's going to be a national event that people are going to start mourning. Interesting, it says that men and women will mourn apart. Says Chazal, that's you see there bechitza. You see, if in a time of avelus, in a time of mourning, men and women can't sit together, Allah has come thing. Says it turns out what was going on right before October 7th was a mechitza issue in Tel Aviv. It's mind blowing. And the only source for mechitza in Tanakh. Now mechitza really goes back, but Chazal said the source for mechitza, and the Gemara in Megillah says, when is this going to happen? When is this Milchemes Gog Magog going to occur? It's going to happen on Sukkot. It's a Gemara. It's a Megillah, Daf Lamed Aleph. And the Gemara says, therefore, the Haftarah that we recite on Sukkot, Shabbos Sukkot, is Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is the only chapters on Gog and Magog. That the word Gog comes from Ezekiel 38. So it's mind-blowing. So when I say to them, October 7th, was that there has to create a unity among the Jewish people who are fighting each other over idiotic things, fighting each other. And we need this unity, and we live by our blood. This is all there, and that's what's happening right now. So people, that's how you can have anti-Zionist religious Jews, because they do not know Navi. If you don't know, how come this rabbi? You don't work that way. When it comes to Mashiach, you have to have Nevi'im. I don't care how big the rabbi is, you have to be Navi. The Gemara in Saita openly asks the question, why did we need 3 Nevi'im, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi, in the Persian Empire than building the second temple? Why? So the Gemara says the reason why is that you could, because Mashiach could have come right then. But what happened? Because the Jews didn't come back from Bavel, so therefore it didn't. But you could have had a Beis HaMikdash, and if you're going to build a Beis HaMikdash, you can't build a Beis HaMikdash without Nevi'im. So therefore, it doesn't matter what any rabbi says. It only matters what the Navi says. They have to have Navi. Without Navi, you can't move. And that's all.
So I would just ask. This was my experience. I was at a program, doesn't matter where and what, but these 3 Jewish girls with their Catholic friend comes over to me, and they say she wants to ask you a question, and she says, why don't Jews believe in Jesus? And I said, don't ask me this question. Don't ask me this question. You're a nice Catholic girl, go to church, No, I really want to know. I said, you really don't want to know. Just trust me, keep a happy life, you're in high school, So her Jewish friend said, no, we want to know too. So I have none of the experience that you have, but you're in a place. So I said, God says, I'm always going to be your God. You'll always be my people. If you go to the far out places, I'll bring you back. No matter how bad you are, I'll bring you back. No matter what you do, I'll bring you back. I will never break this covenant ever, ever. And if somebody comes along and shows you signs and wonders and tells you to break the covenant, kill him. Now, that was a really poor thing to write if he was planning on sending his only son with another message. He should have said, stand by for further announcements, or, put an expiration date. But why would you say if someone comes and tries to change this, that you should kill him? She said, thank you very much. And her friends told me in the morning she was up all night crying. She said, the priest said no Jew can answer this question. So that's all I got. How does it play in Peoria?
You know, what I would do is I would say, what does Tanakh say?
Does
about
that
what
make sense what I said?
Yeah, it does. It does.
But you're not impressed at all.
Well,
I can see the lack of impression on your face.
The reason is that Tanakh is very clear, Parshas Re'eh, Deuteronomy 13, that in fact, if a prophet a dream comes, shows you signs and wonders, but then he says, follow God. Your fathers didn't know, you don't keep the mitzvahs. So he says, do not listen to that prophet of dreams. And the Torah is saying that the guy, Mamish, is doing miracles and telling the future.
It sounds like Jesus.
No. And then the kasha is, so God says, don't follow him. I didn't send him. But then the question is, so why did you let him do miracles? So that's the next puzzle. He says, I'm only testing you to see if you love me. Now people are going, well, this is weird. What do you mean, testing you? Like, well, God's nothing better to do with his life? There's a very big problem. In the ancient world, our Nevi'im, our leaders, were performing mitzvahs. Right? Miracles. There were miracles going on in the Beis HaMikdash, the first Beis HaMikdash.
Right.
There was a fire in the shape of a lion that was there all the time. Okay. So the problem was we needed free will. So because the Jews, the Nevi'im, were performing miracles like Elisha and Eliyahu Novi, if the non-Jews, those who were at Avodah Zarah, could not perform a miracle, we would lose our Bechira. So at a time when the Jews are doing miracles, that means Nisim Nigloyim, then the pagan idolaters had to be doing miracles too, because or else you would have no free will. Now, what happens, we're not going to go into it. The Chazal pray to God to end the taiva f'avodah zarah.
Right.
What happens then is God has to dial down the kedusha and the tumah at the same time. Because if he would only dial down the desire for avodah zarah, but didn't dial down, that's why we needed a sitter after that. We needed a sitter before that, because now we're not. And so nevuah had to come to an end. Then why did nevuah really have to come to an end? Because what was happening is we were losing the signal. In fact, Zechariah is not speaking to God. Really, angels are always speaking to Zechariah. So by the time we get to that last akufa, the last prophets, the signal was coming. Daniel was speaking to angels. Right. Well, how come Moses wasn't speaking to angels? Because this is the end. So the signal is going down. The Anshe Knesset Hagadol, the Great Assembly, had said, we need to end this taiva avodah zarah. So if Hashem turns down the taiva, this lust for avodah zarah, which we can't even understand, he also has to dial down the kedusha. Why? Because or else there'll be no free will. And before you I place life and death, good, evil, uvecharta v'chaim, Deuteronomy 30. So therefore, because today the idol worshippers can't do miracles, so we don't do miracles either. It's a miracle, but there's a way out. The Jews have the best pilots in the world, the best F-16s in the world, and the best tanks in the world. We're such geniuses. And it's a Purim story. The Esther story is a book that lacks the name of God, right? And it's that one book. Why? Because the story of Purim could be attributed to good fortune and serendipity. It happens to be that Ahasuerus would not be the first or the last king in history that killed his own wife. Many kings had a habit. They killed his own wife. A queen couldn't get a life insurance policy. It just happens to be, I'm sure that Esther was a knockout. I'm sure she was absolutely gorgeous. And Mordechai was a member of Anshe Knesset Hagadol. He had to speak many languages. You can't have interpreters in a Bezdin. So he happened to be at the right place at the right time when they're planning an assassination. He overhears it. That means the whole story could be attributed to good luck. Sometimes you throw a penny up enough times, eventually it'll come up heads enough times, you get lucky. People go on a thing. The whole thing was kiblu v'kiblu, unlike Matan Torah, where we had a mountain over our head, except that here you'll be dead. Here we really had a way out and said, this was all just, we got lucky. So Hashem is really hiding behind all the characters in this event. Right. And that's why Chazal tells that when Mashiach comes, what are Jews going to be studying? Only the 5 books of Moses and the Sefer Esther. What's going on? Now we understand. Because the Geula is going to happen in an Esther way, meaning we could attribute all the things that we say is mamash a miracle, but we could say, well, they have anti-missile systems. The Jews are smart. They go to Weizmann Institute, and the Goyim who attack us in Iran are too busy eating falafel with turbans on their heads. So the Jews who are smart beat the Goyim. God has nothing to do. There's a way out. There's an escape hatch. Because if there's no escape hatch, then you can't say I love you. I love you only is pregnant with meaning if I have the opportunity, the real opportunity to say I hate you and reject you, chas v'chalila. So that's why the Christians today are not doing real miracles. All the stuff you see is all chicanery. And the miracles that are happening to us can be explained through serendipity. We got lucky. Right. The only thing is, eventually, when if someone would go into a casino and throw dice and it just keeps on coming up, twos, eventually they'll say there's something wrong with the dice. Right. And that's what the Jews are. It's obviously the deck is loaded, but you got to figure out. But there's a way out. I'm giving you a way out. If that's why people say, why doesn't God just come to me? Why does an angel appear to me? That'll be the worst thing. You'd lose your bechira. Right. You lose in a second. That'll be a nightmare. Unless the Goyim also are having angels running around. Then it's not, because everybody's doing it. Right. But now they're not, so we're not. Follow? It has to be balanced. 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, and 1% trace gases. A perfect mixture so that both plants and humans and gorillas could all live happily together. It's a perfect system.
Rav Tovia, I know you have another interview, and I cannot thank you enough for giving us all this time. I'm going to end with one last question. When did you lose your sprach?
My sprach?
You never slip. You always say Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah. You have it all down, like it just rattles off instantly. You never once stick in a shmais a b'midbar. You went to the mirror. How is it that you managed to excise from your vocabulary all of the sprach terms that from people use?
Because I'm talking to people who wouldn't understand it. I'm talking to people.
Yeah, but it's amazing because I go back and forth.
Right. So it happens to me. Like I gave a shir in Muncie this past year to a very frum community. It was on, I think, July 4th. I think. Was it July 4th? Whatever it was, a big American holiday. But it was time on July 4th. So they don't want to, so the place was packed with Chassidish Oilam in Muncie, in Forche. And it was very geschmack for me to speak, but I was using the yeshiva language with them.
You could go back and forth?
Yeah, of course, that's my home. That's always home, and, Leviticus, so I'm doing this for a long time, but it's always geschmack. It's always, I'm talking to you, a frum Jew, and we're in a frum part of Yerushalayim. We're not sitting in Cairo having a conversation. So we're talking, we're not in London.
No, but you didn't slip once.
I'm not a slippery man.
Wow.
So that's it.
Cool, kavod.
No slipping allowed. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ואת נעשה בחפצו כל